This episode is brought to you by Prime. What if you had one more chance with the one that got away?
Sam.
You came home.
Based on the best-selling novel from Carly Fortune. Every Year After follows childhood friends Sam and Percy as they reunite in the dreamy, nostalgic lakeside town of Barry's Bay.
Love can be hard to find. So if you're lucky enough to find that person, never let go.
A second chance at first love. Every Year After, now streaming only on Prime.
Where is Daredevil?
I'm right here. Don't miss the return of Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again.
So what's next?
I feel liberated.
We're gonna take this city back.
Over medicated.
In an all-new season, now streaming only on Disney+.
They're hunting us. It's time we started hunting them.
I can work with that.
This should be tons of fun.
Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, now streaming only on Disney+.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Hi, this is Jason.
Stacy from Bourbon House, and you're listening to The Hook Rocks with Jay Scott.
Grandpa Wilbur was the first to be saved. He traveled the country playing on the church stage. They passed the hat, that was all he was paid. He was a dying breed long before his day. Oh. Was the same. There was a little voice inside that kept on calling his name. It said, give him 3 calls and the Holy Ghost. They started moving and shaking on the floor. Don't let up when they start to sweat. They'll be dancing all night long in revival. Yes, now watch them dance. Want it dance. Now Wilbur's down in the path that
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's The Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast. I, of course, am Jay Scott, your host, taking you along the way. Thanks for tuning in. I always appreciate it. We are part of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a great network of music-related podcasts. A lot of different stuff on that platform, something for everyone to enjoy. I've had quite a few guests that are fellow Pantheon podcast hosts. I always mention them at the beginning of every episode, like Martin Popoff, the rock historian, Mistress Carrie, the legendary DJ out in Boston, Tom and Zeus from the #1 rated Kiss podcast, Shout Out Loudcast, Aaron and Chris from Decibel Geek, and Vinny Appice and Carmen Peace on the Hangin' and Bangin' podcast. Also Mac out in London on the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast, which is a great podcast too as well. So check out all those. Check out Pantheon Pods on also some social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pantheon Pods, and their website, pantheonpodcast.com. Check out The Hook Rocks wherever you do podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or everywhere. We're on every platform. And don't forget to set your app to automatic download. So whenever I drop a new episode, you get it right to your phone and you can enjoy what I've got in store for you. Don't forget to follow us also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at The Hook Rocks. Please write us a review. Write us some kind words. We always do appreciate when we get great feedback from you. So thank you very much for those that have, and appreciate you if you are willing to do so. So we've had some great episodes recently, some good stuff happening. We just had Tyler Bryan on talking his new album. We had Tuck Smith talking his new single, which is going to be coming out with a new album. He's got a great story to tell with his last couple of years and the roller coaster ride of the music business that kind of got into him, and some great honest discussion with him on what's been happening and how he kind of persevered through it. Tyler Bryan, of course, getting back to that, he's got his new album coming out on September 9th. So it's a really kind of a throwback to his blues influences. There's some rockers on there too as well, but Love Tyler's music. Glad he's got some new stuff out and can't wait for all of you to hear it. We also did a live album review as we do every quarter. We reviewed the legendary UFO album, Strangers in the Night. So hear our perspective on it and what we thought about it as we kind of revisited that record. We celebrated our 3-year anniversary with Stephen Piercy from Rat, and we also celebrated our 400th episode with the Groove Council. So 3-year and 400th episodes, a couple milestones for us. Some new music spotlights as well. Jennifer Benson from Ignescent. We had the Three Sisters from the band The Warning. Great new rock band as well. And plenty other stuff that's in store that just check out wherever you get your podcast, wherever you stream them. There's a lot for you to choose. Can't believe we've hit 400 episodes. We've got another great one, as I always say, for you this evening or whenever you're listening. It's really about the other side of the glass when you're talking about music. We've had great artists on talking about the albums that they've put out, the creative process, putting it all together, writing music, putting together the album, going out on tour, all that stuff. But now we're going to take a look behind the scenes and talk to a producer that has produced one of my favorite albums, if not, in my opinion, the best album of 2022, and that is Goodbye June, See Where the Night Goes. Tremendous album, came out in February, still resonates, still connects with me. Love everything about it, and we're going to be talking with Paul Moak, who had his hand in that album. What's going on, Paul? How are you?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. Thank you for doing this. This is a great honor to have you on and kind of talk about some things we don't normally talk about. We do talk about the music business a lot, but more on like the algorithms and the streaming services and the lack of payout and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, not really fun stuff, but you know, all the stuff that people should know, music fans should know, kind of where and how these bands are surviving these days. But this is a little,
yeah, for sure.
This is really about the creative process and how you got involved in it and kind of how you work with these artists.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and it's an honor to be here and I get to talk to you today. Really cool.
We always start out the same way every time we have a first-time guest on the podcast, and that is really what the show is all about. Just like every rock song has a hook that sucks you in, every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, an album, a band, or performance that hooked them on rock and roll. What was it for you?
Oh, man. Well, there have been a billion throughout my career, but the very first kind of moment that music grabbed me, besides listening as a kid, you know, my parents listened to good music. My dad loved the Beatles and the Stones, and he's of that generation. So we always had good music playing. But funny story, I actually won a guitar off the radio when I was a kid. And that's how it all started. You were telling me before we got on about buying your son a guitar. Yeah, this was in the 90s. So do you remember the Yellow Pages? And then there was a competitor called the Real Yellow Pages that came along. And I think it was categorized in a different way, and it was supposed to be faster. And so the rock radio station in my town, I grew up in Mississippi, they had a contest to show how fast the new Yellow Pages were. And so if you called in, you were number 9, let's say, they would say, all right, look up Joe's Crab Shack, you know, or whatever. And if you could find it in under 30 seconds, you win a prize. And they were giving away a guitar. And I don't know what it was in me that was like, I'm going to win that guitar, you know? And so I got on, we had 2 phone lines at the time. My sister had her own line. So that, you know, that was a very 90s thing. And I got on her line and my mom got on in the kitchen, and my mom was the 9th caller. And she looked it up, and I won a PV Predator, which was like a Strat copy. And I remember coming home, and my dad played a little guitar, and he taught me a couple of chords. And the first thing I did was pull out my parents' vinyl of Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock, and thinking, well, I'm going to learn that, which was like the worst place to start. You know? And it hooked me, man. That was probably the most definitive moment But in terms of, you know, the switch to I want to do this for the rest of my life, I think probably happened. I was thinking about moving to Nashville because I was in bands and, you know, had developed a pretty voracious appetite for guitar. And my dad was like, why don't we go up to Nashville and spend a weekend and see how it is? And we came up here, and a buddy of mine had a friend who had a friend who had a friend that worked for a merchandising company who called. I went to go visit them because they made T-shirts for all the artists. And he said, hey, we have 2 free tickets to a show tonight at Starwood Amphitheater. Do you and your dad want to go? Because no one here wants to go. We were like, yeah. And it was the Wallflowers and the Counting Crows when they were both huge, you know, like this would have been like 97 or 98. And we went, and it was just such an unbelievably cosmic moment of like, I need to move here. This is where people are really doing things. And that really was when I made the decision to move up about maybe 2 months after that. And the first show I saw at that same spot when I was here, like after I'd moved, was Metallica. And that was life changing too. It was like totally confirming that I was in the right spot, you know. And I've had 100 of those since then, you know. It's what keeps me in the game, I think.
Yeah, I mean, rock and roll really is the gift that keeps on giving, you know. I mean,
yeah.
You know, it's always about inspiration. It's always about seeing a show that makes the, you know, the hair on your neck stand up, you know. It's just that energy, that synergy. When you look back and with the guitar and moving to Nashville, you mentioned that you went to the show with your dad, and you mentioned that your mom was on the phone, you know, helping you win this guitar.
Yeah.
How much did it mean to you that your parents were supportive in you pursuing what you wanted to do?
It means everything, man. It still means everything because, you know, this lifestyle, there's no like manual or roadmap or college, you know, to figure out a life in the arts. And what I always say is it's high highs and low lows, you know. And my parents, my whole family runs a mom and pop operated business in Jackson, Mississippi, where I grew up. And so to be this black sheep that wants to go figure out this whole different way of life, to have them be supportive of that means everything, man. It really, it helps in the hard times to know that people believe in you. And, you know, I think my dad especially is kind of living a little vicariously through me, getting to do rock and roll for a living and get out and see the world from a different point of view, you know. It's very cool.
And you ended up at Belmont University there in Nashville.
Yeah, that was like the Trojan horse for getting me to Nashville, because my dad really wanted me to get a business degree so I'd have something to fall back on, you know. And I had no intention of doing anything but getting up here and trying to be in bands, you know. But that was our big compromise. So I started going to school and I did really well at the beginning when I had no friends and, you know, didn't know anybody. And then as I started to join in bands and start playing out and kind of really going hard after music, you know, the grades just inevitably went down. and you know, I started touring with different bands. And then there was one big band that offered me the chance to go on a tour. And there was no way I was going to be able to do it and school. So I ended up dropping out and told myself it would be for that semester. And then, you know, here we are 20 something years later. But, you know, it was the right thing for me because it really was a safe spot to land in a new town where I didn't know anybody. There's a couple of people that I was in my freshman class that I still work with. And I've gone back and taught classes at Belmont, which is really funny because, I'm a dropout. But, everybody has their path of how they get here. And that was mine. It was a good experience.
Yeah. I've talked to my son, who I mentioned to you before, about doing the music theory camp next year at Belmont.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking into that. He's interested in doing that because he's going to be a senior this year. We're looking at schools, and he keeps talking about schools that are close to Nashville. That's where he, kind of wants to go. And I'm like, all right, and I've kind of told him the same thing, dude, you get a business degree. It's got something to fall back on, and then once you get your degree, go and do what you need to do,
Yeah.
So have those conversations too.
Yeah. I think, I've got kids now, and I think that if they were to tell me that they wanted to pursue a career in any kind of art form, it's just unfortunate that that's stuff that you can't really teach. I mean, you can teach methodology and theory and stuff like that, but what I really needed was someone to tell me how to do my taxes, and like, I'm a self-employed business basically. So like, any advice in that kind of realm would have been greatly appreciated, or just how to navigate the ups and downs of the music business. It's kind of one of those things that, like the School of Hard Knocks, you just have to go through it and figure out your path, That being said, to have a semester or two where, I had a schedule and a place to stay in the dorm and all that kind of stuff, it was the right transition for me. I'd probably do it the same if I had it to do over again. Although Nashville is a different place than when I moved here.
How so?
It's just grown a lot in the last 20 years, and especially in the last 10 years. And real estate shot through the roof. I feel bad for musicians that try to move here now because the cost of living is just so much higher. And it also seems like it was a pretty small, tight-knit music community with the same kind of, everybody was playing at the same venues, and you'd have your band open up for somebody else's band, and the next week, it'd be the opposite. And Nashville's grown so much that it's not as small town as it used to be, I guess. But who knows? Now I sound like an old guy.
Well, I know there's been a lot of people transitioning from LA to Nashville, especially the rock scene. When you look at the rock scene, because I do a lot of new music spotlights on this show, and the amount of bands that are in Nashville now and the amount of artists that are in Nashville keeps growing year by year. And I don't know if they consider the cost of living more, coming out of LA. They probably think this is a break, but to see that rock scene kind of growing, is cool. But I was just out there for Creatures Fest on Memorial Day weekend. It was like this Kiss festival. Vinnie Vincent was making his return, and Ace Frehley was there. It was cool. And I hadn't been out to Nashville probably 8 years. And I was like, man, where did all this traffic come from? I did not expect all this traffic. And I don't think the infrastructure has really kept up with the population growth yet.
Exactly.
And I think that's coming eventually. It has to come eventually.
Yeah.
But it has gone through I haven't even really experienced, because I don't live there, but just the amount of people in the bands that are out there in the rock, community, it used to be just thought of as a country and western town. And it's kind of slowly evolving into a big rock crowd. So I totally get what you're saying too.
And I am thankful for that, because I didn't grow up on country. I didn't really know, Nashville was just the closest city to where I grew up that had some kind of music business, but I've always been a rock guy, my favorites, I'm the age of Guns N' Roses and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and the whole Seattle scene. So That's like, those are the songs I was learning when I was learning guitar, you know. So, you know, even though the rock community here is smaller than the country music, there's a lot of great talent. You know, you mentioned Tyler Bryant. I've worked with him a ton, wrote songs on his first record, and Caleb and his band works with me over here all the time. So it's cool. The rock people kind of find each other, you know?
Yeah, I mean, because even though it grows, it is still a small, big city, you know? And you know, the community, you know, is growing, but as I've learned, the music community, although it's huge, it still has a very small feel to it. You know, everybody knows each other. Everybody, you know, has worked with each other or knows this guy. Everybody's kind of connected somehow.
Yeah, it's true. It is true.
So how did you get from playing on stage, you know, being in bands into working behind the glass, working on production, engineering, in that aspect of music?
Yeah. Well, I think it started from, I always wanted to be in a band, and I went through years of being in bands here when I first moved, getting record deals, losing record deals, that whole thing, and not really finding something that kind of stuck. And I started getting calls to play for other artists as a side guy, which is a totally different thing than being in a band, you know. And at first it was awesome because it was like, oh, wait, I'm getting paid to play guitar for you. That's cool. And then the higher I kind of climbed up on the sideman chain, the better touring there was, you know, getting your own hotel room, that kind of thing. But it was the more removed from any kind of the creative process of the things I missed about being in a band, really having an input on the sound and the vibe and the whole thing. And I started doing sessions on guitar as, you know, just a natural evolution from being a touring musician. And I fell in love with the studio, and I realized, like, man, I love being in the room when the magic happens, you know? And like you were saying earlier, like that moment when you're watching a show and the band is on such a level that the hair on the back of your neck stands up. That feeling in the studio is just, it's a drug, you know? And so the more sessions I was doing, the more getting involved in records and writing, it just kind of was a natural evolution to where I started recording. Friends of mine on I started out with a Yamaha MT4X 4-track analog tape machine, and moved from there to a digital hard disk recorder, moved from that into an early version of Pro Tools with a laptop, and really started in a bedroom, and just piece by piece, as I was doing sessions, playing live, writing, recording my friends, just it kind of all kind of kept evolving. And it really changed when I bought a little house in 2004 and kind of turned the whole thing into a studio. And then when I finally had a place set up where people could actually come and work, that's when it really kind of snowballed. And I was still touring during this time. I kind of got off the road at about 2007-ish, 2008, to really pursue how far can I take this studio thing. And then just buried myself in the studio from that time until COVID, you know. And coming out of COVID, had a buddy of mine who's another session player call and say, would you ever want to go on the road again? I said, nah. He said, what if it was Ann Wilson from Heart? And I was like, okay. So I've been out, you know, I've spent half the year this year in the studio and half the year out playing with her. And I've realized at this point in my life that I need both, because that interaction that you have with the audience in a real time moment, it doesn't happen in the studio like that, you know, and they feed off of each other in a really cool way. So it's a new chapter in my life to be back out touring, you know, but it feels right for now.
When you bought that house and you kind of turned it into a studio, you know, who were some of the acts that you were having, you know, working with back then?
It was more up and coming acts that, you know, were coming out of bands that, you know, that I was kind of in the scene with at the time. But there was a couple that kind of put me on, like there were two records that really kind of snowballed for me here in Nashville. One was a guy named Matt Carney, who's like a big indie pop artist.
Songwriter guy?
Yeah. And we made a record called Nothing Left to Lose that did really well for him. And
I have that
kind
record.
of really.
Yeah.
It kind of put me on the map with some of the business side of Nashville. And then the other was he's mostly a songwriter now, but an artist named Trent Dabbs, who's here. And the only reason I was connected with him was he was also from Mississippi, and his mom called my mom, said, my son's moving up to Nashville. And so my mom was like, will you meet with this guy? And just small town Mississippi stuff. And we met and we really hit it off, and we ended up recording a lot over the next maybe 2 years. And then he did an EP with me that really didn't do anything outside of Nashville, but a lot of artists here loved that EP. And so both of those kind of happened at the same time, and they just started leading to more work. And, you know, it's still word of mouth and someone hearing something that they think is cool and trying to figure out who did it, you know. There's no real business other than, for me, I mean, I'm sure other people have a way of doing it, but for me, it's just like, I hope the music I make continues to bring in more people that want to make music, you know. But those were the first two, and that was like way back, 2007, 8-ish, that first couple of years in that house.
You mentioned, as we talked about your move to Nashville and being on stage and playing in these bands and finding other, you know, musicians and then going and becoming a, you know, kind of a hired gun, more or less, and then going into recording and producing and kind of starting out that way. You know, when you think of those first moments in Nashville and playing live, you know, whatever club or whatever bar that you were playing in Nashville, and then also starting out production, like what were the kind of what's the mindset difference with that?
Yeah. Well, it's two different sides of the same coin, I believe. But I think for me, what it really was about is I'm interested in all of it. Anything that has to do with the creative process. And so, you know, at this point in my life, as painful as it was that none of my bands worked out, I think it worked out for the best for me in the long run, because I don't think I would have been satisfied just being the guitar player in a band. There's too much out there in terms of the studio and live to learn about and to pursue, that I feel like I'm still learning at this point in my career, you know, 25 years in. So for me, the mindset, besides like, do I have enough money to eat and pay the bills? The mindset is like, how do I keep myself in a place where this is still fun and I'm still curious about what's out there, you know? And when you say being in a band, being a hired gun, moving into the studio, each of those phases was kind of like a big creative shift, right? And with that comes an element of uncertainty and danger, lack of a safety net, so to speak. And I kind of now at this point in my career realize that in order to stay relevant creatively, you kind of have to shake up the game every couple of years. I think of producers like Daniel Lanois, or who did like Peter Gabriel and U2 and real experimental music, and then Willie Nelson, just constantly trying to push the envelope. Or a guy like Rick Rubin, you see him work with everyone from Run DMC to Dixie Chicks to Slayer, And for me, it's just been a constant curiosity, man. Like, why does this record sound this way? And could I ever make a record that sounds that way? We got together because of Goodbye June. That has been a fantastic evolution of helping three guys that I've come to love so much find themselves through the course of a couple of records, and having conversations about what we like about this type of music or this, and really trying to create something that we feel like we all passionately feel is great, and it took a long time to get to where they're at now. And I think part of that is just the curiosity part of it that I keep talking about, I'm curious to see what's next for them, because this was the record I feel like we've been trying to make for 10 years.
Well, I remember when Tyler and I talked while I think it was just about completed, and he's like, I can't wait for you to hear this album. It's kind of just plugging in and playing, and and the energy on the album too. Other albums have energy, but I think the energy from the listener standpoint that I hear is like coming out of a pandemic, coming out of all the stuff. It was like, man, this is the right record to hear coming out of all this stuff, and it was probably recorded during the pandemic. But, when you hear their story, which is such a touching and unique story that they have as a band, and, having all this momentum before the pandemic, and like most artists and bands, having that all go away just because of the circumstances, when you're in the studio with them and you're recreating and you got to push them and you got to do all this stuff, how do you find the right sequence of words? How do you find the right moments? How do you connect with that energy with the band?
Yeah, that's a great question. You find it by doing it wrong for years and years and years, Now, it is about being, I'm a very, probably intuitive person towards reading the temperature of the room, where the struggle is, and kind of being real patient with the process. With those guys, or actually with any band that I'm in the studio with, I never want them to feel like I'm this authoritative dictator and they have to get it right, or, it's my way or the highway. There are some great records that have been made that way, but I kind of have always viewed it as I want to be an ally of the band and a friend. And so the main element that I'm looking for as a foundation to build off of is trust. The band has to feel like I'm in their corner, and that the decisions I'm making, even if we disagree on those decisions, that it's in their best interest, or what I believe is their best interest. And I feel like establishing that with the guys in Goodbye June, it's an interesting story, because the first time we ever wrote together, way back in 2013, was this song called Daisy. The very first time we ever wrote. And that was a big hit for them that kind of got them signed, started their whole chapter with Interscope. And And then the course of making that first record, Magic Valley, was really us learning how to trust each other, you know. And that's not a great way to start because we had so much pressure from the label and A&R and all that. But we really kind of found each other in that time. And then when the opportunity came up to do this new record, that trust made it so much easier to really push the envelope musically and sonically. You know, like, for example, Tyler, and he'd probably murder me for saying this, but I call him the wild man because he can play the most amazing stuff if he turns his brain off and just plays, right? And so all those solos are just him getting out there in the ether and just kind of losing himself in the guitar, which is fantastic. But then I'd be like, dude, that was sick. Do that again, but change this. And you couldn't do that if you paid him $1 million because he was just out there on the edge, you know? And so learning how that kind of, like how he works as a guitar player and then being able to kind of grab the best out of that and also challenge him like, dude, it would be awesome if you could do this and then be able to recreate it a second time, you know, and kind of giving him homework to go home and work with, like, all right, go study this solo and come back and let's do it for real tomorrow, you know. And you know, with Landon, the singer, he's really come such a long way. He's always had a killer voice, but coming up with a real angle for what he's trying to say. And actually all three of them are great writers. But, you know, it's just stuff that takes time and patience and really believing in the long mission of the band. So it's really walking arm in arm with the artist over a pretty long period of time, which I'm thankful for because we have this record now, you know.
You talk about trust and you talk about the challenge after you made the song Daisy. When you are establishing that with an artist, a band, mm-hmm. Is it the trust that exists before you go in and start creating with them? Or is it normally like, you know, we're going to do this record, we're in, and because I mean, artists in general, just the nature of the beast, are very protective of their stuff, right? They're creative, you know, they're what they created. Like, you know, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes through a lot of stuff. And then now you're giving it to someone like you, who's now going to make it sound like they want it to sound or make it sound how it should sound, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I imagine when you get into a studio that it is like a roller coaster ride, right? There's a lot of happy moments, like you're creating with them. You become part of the band for that process. And then there's moments where you're like, you know, someone's really kind of high on a moment in a song or a riff or a lyric or how it's, you know, presented. And you're like, no, I think it should be done that way. And that's a really, you talk about Tyler being out on the edge. You know, that's almost like the whole process being out on an edge at some point, you know? I mean, that can be a scary place for everybody involved. Absolutely. And, you know, how do you kind of, you know, keep that synergy going, keep that all moving forward?
Well, one of the tricks or, you know, ways that I can go about doing that is to really kind of not try to get bogged down in a certain area. And you can feel the energy in the room shift when, let's say you have a band and we're trying to track a song and it's apparent that the drums aren't special, right? But we can't figure out, we changed the tempo. We've tried a different drum kit. We just can't figure out how to crack the code on why this isn't feeling great for everybody, right? Instead of just pounding that into the ground until we figure it out, I'll shift gears. Like, well, guess what? We tracked this other song the other day and it needs a solo. Let's work on that for a while. and just try to keep it where the momentum's moving forward, no matter what part of the process you're in. And part of that is easier for me to do because we're working in my studio. So we're not like beholden to the clock of like, we got to get all this done before, 10 or they're going to charge us again. I'm able to kind of bounce around as we're working on stuff. And that's generally the best way to keep it from getting bogged down or contentious. And sometimes it's just like, hey, guess what? We all need to go home and take a break and come back tomorrow and try this again. Getting away from it is a great thing. Like sometimes when you get in the studio, you get too tunnel vision and kind of lose sight of the big picture. And so stepping away is another thing. And just trying to really stay positive and really drive home the message that like, hey, we're going to figure this out. And let's just try to have fun while we're doing it, because if we're not, what's the point in being here, And some days are hard, but it's a constant check-in process, I guess, with the artist. And lastly, eliminating anyone from the room that doesn't need to be here. That's a big one, because I've noticed the vibe and the momentum go straight out the window when the A&R guy shows up, or the manager, or the booking agent, or the girlfriend. I usually try to set a time and place where those can happen, but really kind of keep this a sacred space for creating with just the people that need to be there.
I touch on that a lot on the show, especially with new bands coming up, because things are so easily accessible now, right? I mean, anyone can put a song on a streaming service. Anybody, the technology has made things great where you can hear artists that you normally wouldn't hear. I always use the example, me growing up in the 80s and early 90s, that, a band from New York that was playing local clubs in New York would never be heard in Chicago. Right. Just wasn't the way it was. So with the, invention of all these streaming services and all this technology, you're able to like hear bands in New York. You're able to hear bands in Sweden and all over the place, which is fantastic. It's awesome. The accessibility is great. But there's also a curse with that too. There's a lot of people putting music out that shouldn't be putting music out. Right.
Agreed.
And, I always remember that quote of Daily Roth, who said Van Halen played thousands of hours in the clubs before they even went in and recorded a demo, and just like you physically work out, you got to work out a song, you got to work out what it all is. And a lot of artists just new artists, I should say, don't understand that. Yeah. And like you just said, people in the room, you need people in the room that tell you that doesn't sound right. This can sound better. You don't want your mom and your girlfriend in the room because they're going to tell you it sounds great. Exactly. And in reality, it doesn't. And, you doing what you do and knowing that element is out there, right? And knowing there's a lot of emerging artists that, are chasing a record deal, which in my opinion, I don't know why people still chase that. You can, you don't need it anymore. It's just, from what I've heard, it's just a land of heartache and heartbreak.
It is.
But how do you go over a subject like that? Because, there are artists in a band that need that girlfriend there to have their ego stroked and to have that comfort. And now you're taking that out of the room.
Yeah.
How do those conversations go?
I just usually always say, man, there's a time and place for everything, and we got to work, and I need you focused, and, so let's set a time for whoever it is to come by, but let's be cool about, what we're here to do, which is to get a job done. And most people are pretty awesome about that, and, there's some bands that can have distraction around and it's no big deal. Again, it goes back to just kind of reading the temperature of the room and knowing when it should be stripped down to the core elements. And most people when they're singing vocals really don't want anybody that doesn't need to be there around, because you're really bearing your soul there. And I believe in trying to create a space where people feel free to take chances, knowing that if they fail, it's a safe space. Because, but much like you said, like anybody can put music out, right? There's, YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video of guys that can play perfectly, right? But it doesn't do anything for me because they're not out there on the edge, like I was saying with Tyler, and vocally, same thing. You could have the chops of Celine Dion, but if there's no emotion in it and none of your soul in it, then it's going to fall flat. And so most of the time when you're in the studio, no matter what you're working on, really trying to get people to kind of turn their brain off and sing or play from the heart and let their spirit kind of be a part of the song is really, that's the stuff that people connect with, And so sometimes it takes removing people to get that to happen, or just even having a conversation of like, look, man, I need you to really bear your soul in this vocal. What do we have to do to make that happen? We need to turn the lights off, get everybody out of here. Let's talk about why you wrote these lyrics. What was your mind like when this song came to fruition? Because that's the spot we need to be in, so that when you sing it, I believe it, and I feel it. And it's different with every artist, man. It's really different with every artist.
As we talked about the Goodbye June album, See Where the Night Goes, and how raw sounding it is, and how, it's basically plugging in and playing. Is that really what you want to capture with the artists you work with? Does it differ? Are you the one that kind of leads that direction when people come to you and want to record and they say, Paul, what can you do for us? Or what's your approach with this music?
Yeah, it's different every time. It is a conversation between me and the artist. Sometimes we know before we even record the first note, like what our ultimate goal is. But for example, with Goodbye June, in the previous years of them trying to find themselves, we tried all different kinds of stuff. Like if you go listen to Magic Valley, that first record, it's a lot more experimental than See Where the Night Goes. And in my opinion, some of it was good. Some of it, we missed the mark on what they would become. But you learn from all that. And then when we got ready to make this record, we sat down and had real conversations about like, what are the strongest attributes of this band? Landon's vocal, Tyler's guitar playing, and Brandon's riff writing, right? And so let's not worry about being like White Stripes cool or lo-fi or anything. Let's make, another question was, what kind of shows do you want to play? We want to play big shows, Let's get like a AC/DC stripped rock, raw record like the ones that we love. And so we set hard rules, like we weren't going to overdub a lot of guitars. We were going to work harder on making each part shine so that we didn't just layer a bunch of stuff, right? And we committed to recording to 2-inch tape to keep it down to less than 24 tracks per song. And so we recorded to 2-inch, and then we mixed it down to a 1/2-inch tape, just like all my favorite, like Back in Black was made, or Appetite for Destruction. And probably our biggest rule was, how can we make this as big as it can possibly be without just adding stuff on top, but making each part shine? And that was the big focus. So we worked a lot on their individual guitar tones so that you know that the left side's Brandon and the right side's Tyler. And you know, once we found those sounds, those combination of amps, that was like, well, that's going to be it for the record, you know. And that was unique and special for this project. On another project, it might be completely a different approach, you know. But in the case of Goodbye June, it was like we kind of got to this point where everybody knew exactly what we needed to do. Right. We kind of all realized it at the same time, I think. And I feel like everybody was willing to put in the work because it's not easy to make records that way. You know, you can't just like go into Pro Tools and shift something to the left, you know, to get it in time or whatever. It was like really working with the guys to get something that had that space around it, like the great rock records that we love. And I'm really proud of it, man. I'm really proud of them because they put in a lot of hard work to make that happen.
You mentioned Pro Tunes, and, you know, we live in a world that pop music today is way overproduced, and a lot of music is way overproduced because of, you know, the accessibility to technology. Again, it gives you the ability to do things, but then you can go crazy with it, and it just doesn't even sound like music. You know, for you, and, you know, being in Nashville now for as long as you have, and kind of seeing the evolution of how music is produced and how music is created, how do you navigate through all that technology and really kind of get bare bones and kind of really get to the heart of the music and hear the music? Because a lot of people rely on that auto tune, they rely on these other, you know, Pro Tools to really, you know, formulate the music. They can't match it when it's live. That's a whole different topic. But how do you, like, you still have that old school mentality with like this new wave of new technology that is really making music more and more artificial as each day goes by?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I feel like for me, I've always been more interested in the out of the box part of music, the interaction between musicians on the floor, and the more organic side, I guess, of what happens when you're making a record where people are performing together. And what I say all the time is I didn't get into this to be staring at a computer screen and have an artist staring at the back of my head, you know, while I just mouse click their record away. It's just not interesting to me. I think I just kind of dug my heels in the ground about like, man, I've studied the records that I grew up loving, and I don't want to be a Luddite by any means. I'm going to learn how to use all the new technology and everything, but I'm going to keep my heart focused on what I know works, which is people being honest and playing together and trying to find that wave where you hit the wave and you kind of lose yourself in the song. And when you get done with it and you listen back, you're like, I can't believe we did that, you know? And so I guess it was as production values change and people started working more in the box, I've just kind of been more true to who I am, which is more of an out of the box kind of classic definition of a record producer, just trying to get the performance right. Kind of the best way to say it maybe is right now we're in this age of just get it in the computer and then we can make it whatever we need it to be. You know, like I got this guitar part. We'll just get it in and then we can decide which amp it's going to go through and if it's going to have reverb or not on it. I want to do all that before we even get to the computer, because then we're committing to something that we all feel like is great. And not that there's anything wrong with modern production technique, but I do feel like at the end of the day, people can hear the difference between a group of musicians finding that wave or someone creating a track in the box, you know. And I will always want to be in the more collaborative, creative zone where, you know, let's say you wrote a song and you were like, how would you hear this? I could tell you if I was going to make the song all by myself, what it would sound like. But if I hired a couple of friends to come over and we all worked on it together, it's the sum of all of our personalities imparting on this piece of music. And to me, that's so much more interesting than what I could come up with on my own, you know. And it happens all the time in the studio, man, where I thought, you know, because usually as a producer, I'll live with work tapes. And then if it's a solo artist, the session players we hire might not have heard the song until we're actually in the studio that day. And to hear it come alive in a way that's different than what I'd envisioned in my mind is such a beautiful process, you know. And I just think back on some of my favorite records. There's a distinct personality. Like let's take Appetite. You know that's Steven Adler playing the drums. It sounds like him. And when they switch drummers for Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, it doesn't sound the same because it's a different person. And the fact that, you know, the way Lars plays the drums, you immediately know it's Metallica. And if they had a different drummer, it wouldn't be Metallica, you know. Having such a strong sonic imprint of your personality, what's more beautiful than that, you know? And I think that's one of the things that's missing with in the box production is like the only thing that differentiates this song from the other song is who's singing the vocal on it, you know? But that's been plaguing pop music forever, you know?
but it's starting to, you know, it's starting to creep into other areas too. I mean, Capitol Records signed an AI rapper, you know, and they canceled the contract because of the pushback for a variety of reasons. But I was just stunned that even occurred. Like this was even being considered, you know, like how did we get here? You know, and because like you, I'm part of that older generation where, man, you know, when you hear the Mistakes live, that's part of the experience, man. That's part of like, you know, the greatness of a live performance, you know, hearing them flub a note or whatever, that kind of adds a whole new element to that specific concert, right? Or them improvising something that sounds totally badass. And, you know, now, you know, again, a totally different topic, but, you know, you hear the tracks live and you hear all the stuff and the AI being signed and pop music. And now, you know, even some of that stuff is starting to creep into rock and roll. I still believe that there will always be a place for authenticity, right? Yeah. I never think, or I will never think that that's ever completely going to go away.
Yeah.
But what scares me is the generation that comes after, will they still feel that same way because of what they're listening to and what music is becoming?
I think they will, man. I'm hopeful for that because you said it, that you said there will always be a place for authenticity. I think that place might not be in the major label record system the way it was when we were growing up, you know. But I think about all the millions and millions of kids that are watching videos from last weekend with the Foo Fighters celebrating Taylor's life and how big of a moment that was. There's no way that there's kids out there that are seeing that and not being turned on to that and saying, man, I want to be in a band like that, you know? They might not like that music as much as some TikTok artists that they follow right now, but I still think that name me a TikTok artist that could sell out Wembley Stadium like that, you know. And you look at all the biggest tours right now, it's like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and Poison, and sure, it's to an older crowd, but I think that experience of seeing someone in a live setting where they're not just performing for you, it's you participating in an exchange, you know, and that's the thing that I think will never die. And so maybe it doesn't live in like the Interscope, Sony, Universal system. It might be harder to find moving forward, but I think it will always be there, you know. And I think case in point, probably 75%, I would say, of the records that I make are outside the major label systems. And then 25% is. I think that's evidence right there of if the way I'm trying to make records is the way we're talking about, it's existing right now outside of the major label format, which is fine, you know. I just hope that people, like I was really excited that you reached out because it means there's somebody who's heard that Goodbye June record and likes it, you know. And for them, I think getting out in front of people and turning on fans one performance at a time, it's grueling, but it's tried and true and it works. And I think they're out there doing that right now, you know.
Yeah, I think back to that moment when I took my son to his first concert. It was Butch Walker.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he was 5, and I had bought him like a year earlier this toy guitar. It wasn't like it had strings and everything, but it was a Toys R Us. It was like a pre-play guitar. So we get back from Butch Walker, and he goes in his room and he grabs the guitar, which he had not touched since I bought it for him. I think he maybe picked it up, looked at it like this is too complicated and forget it. And he was sitting on his bed trying to like play. And I go, hey, what are you doing? He's like, Dad, I want to play guitar. You know, like direct correlation to what he just saw, which was a beautiful moment, you know, like, wow.
That's so cool.
It connected with him, you know? So yeah, I think that has that ability, because one thing that authentic music has that the overproduce or the, whatever you want to call it, the over technology music or whatever, the authentic stuff will always inspire.
Yeah.
Will always grab that kid, will always, you know, give a kid a sense of wonder. You know, I think of that Van Halen album debut. I remember being a kid listening to Eruption going, what the hell is going on? Like, what is this? It's that sense of wonder. Like you're trying to figure out, like, what is this a guitar? It sounds like a spaceship. What is happening? Yeah. And I think that will always grab you more than something that the beat sounds just like every other song. It's auto-tuned. It's not, it just doesn't sound, you know, real. And, I firmly believe that. I really do.
Well, you know, and too, rock music, it got into a zone where it was doing what pop music is doing now, where everything was overproduced and you couldn't tell a song one from the other except for the singer, and it was all about the music video. So we've been here before. I think the thing is, like you said, authenticity. Maybe the hardest struggle right now is there's just so much content coming at you that it's hard for a band like Goodbye June to find their way through all the noise, you know. And there's not even just bad music. Music is now competing with social media and, you know, YouTube and everything else that's taking attention away from someone just sitting down and enjoying a piece of music, you know. It's a complicated world out there for an artist these days, especially, man, I have a special place in my heart for solo female artists, because like how to break your thing online it's such a long road these days, you know, and trying to stay authentic to who you are is tough when you're being asked to, you know, sing your song in your car on TikTok or whatever, you know, whatever it is that people are doing these days to try to gain attention.
As far as producing goes, who are your influences in producing?
Man, probably number one is probably Brendan O'Brien. You know, he did almost a fair amount of Black Crowes, but most all of Pearl Jam's records. I don't think he was on 10. I think he joined up with the band after that, up until I think their newest release. Audio Slave. He's just a great rock producer. And if you go look him up, his credits are 2 miles long. But I love that he's kind of been behind the scenes, just making great records for the last 25 years. And I think I connect with him a lot because of the way his drums sit in a mix. It's just really powerful. So he's a big one. Rick Rubin's a big one. I mean, that guy's undeniable. You know, from the Chili Peppers. I mean, honestly, so many great records that he's been a part of. I love the Johnny Cash stuff that he did at the end of Johnny's life. Let's see, who else? Rob Cavallo, who signed Green Day, did Dookie, American Idiot. Those records sound insane to me. He also did My Chemical Romance, Black Parade, which is an amazing sounding record. I love Daniel Lanois. He's in a different category, but I just love how experimental, and he just, I can't remember which side of the brain. Left brain is one and right brain's the other. Or like, which one's the
creative and analytic? I think it's,
yeah.
I think it's the left side is your creative. I think, I don't know.
He'd be out there all the way on the left, you know, and he's been a big influence. Honestly, it's more the sonics of those records than necessarily. Eric Valentine would be another. He did Queens of the Stone Age and that first Third Eye Blind record, which sounds huge. And I really like him a lot because he's made a big presence online, like kind of going back and sharing a lot about his journey and how he's done things, and really giving back to people like me that are, you know, curious about how those records are made. And yeah, so that'd be a short list, but you know, there's other genres too that have impacted me just as much as rock. It really, I just love music, man. Still.
Well, you also collect a lot of gear too, and you can see some of it in the background as we talk here. You know, how did you start to assemble this collection that you have?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been piece by piece, man. It started when I first started touring. You know, I would go in pawn shops on the road, and I've always just been, I love music stores. I worked in a music, actually, the store that gave me the guitar that I went off the radio, I ended up getting a job there the last couple of years I was in high school. And so I've just always been fascinated with the tools of how records get made. And it started out just trying to collect guitars, just like, man, it'd be great to have a Strat, you know, a cool Strat. It'd be great to have a guitar with humbuckers, you know. And then I'd hear a song and wonder what it was and find out, oh, it was this that they used. And just always been kind of chasing it and buying and selling stuff as I go. And you know, I guess this collection now just shows how long I've been in the game, you know. But it all gets used. It's all, you know, tools of making records.
Do you ever have that moment when you're going to be working with an artist and you've got some gear and you're like, man, this gear fits perfectly with what they're trying to do?
That's my favorite thing in the world, man. Especially when someone's like references like, you know, an old Beatles song. I'm like, well, actually, this is exactly what they used. This would be a good starting point, whether it's a snare drum or a keyboard sound or something like that. And I feel like that's part of my job as a producer, is maybe not to have the exact instrument that they need, but to know how to get the emotion of what they're trying to get across. You know, if an artist says, man, I would love it if the guitar was more wet here, you know, it's like, well, I think you mean this by wet, grabbing a reverb pedal, and, you know, is this right? Yeah, that's close, you know. But I love that, chasing tone. It's a fun part of the job.
When you have an artist come in and they want to, you know, they want to record an album and they've got some demos, and you're talking with them to see if you guys are a good fit, right? Because that's so important.
Absolutely.
Do you ever have the thought that, you know, the initial meeting's really intense and there's going to be a lot of pressure, not pressure, a lot of tension in the room? Do you embrace stuff like that because out of that tension can become something beautiful? Or maybe, you know, is it maybe this isn't a good fit type of thing?
Yeah. I've had both experiences, honestly. The way I kind of go about it is kind of looking at three different areas. One, do I musically understand where this artist is wanting to go? Am I into the music? Two, what's the financial situation of this project? Is this something that I'm doing because I love it and I believe in this person? We're going to try to figure out how to get compensated after. Or is this an artist that has a budget? Is there a label involved? You know, whatever. And then third, and this goes to what you're talking about, is how do the artist and I get along? Are we on the same page socially? Do we connect when we're really talking about music? And usually, if 2 out of 3 of those are positive, I will take the gig. And most likely what it is I understand them musically and we get along great. And there's no money, you know, or very little money involved, or we got to call in favors or whatever. And that's great. It always works out in the end. Because I believe that if you're truly doing something that you're passionate about and it's the right fit, then it's going to find its way to the light of day. The only time I've ever broken that rule is when the money's good, but the music's not great, and the artist and I don't really connect, and it's always a disaster. So I try not to do that at this point in my career. But, you know, there's a difference between tension creating results versus an artist not being willing to let you into their process or being too overly protective. And sometimes you don't really find that stuff out until you're in the middle of it, you know. But, you know, like a great example would be, there was a record I did not too long ago. It was just a 1-song thing. And the artist said, I just want you to know, he was an established artist. He said, I just want you to know, I do all my vocals at home. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about that. And he's like, well, so many records ago, I did this song at home and it became a hit. So I've always done my vocals at home since then. And for me, it's like vocals are the most important part. I want to get in there and really kind of figure out how to bring this thing to life without, you know, just given it to you to go do on your own. And he wouldn't even consider doing vocals with me here. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. I still took the gig and we got it done. But if I'd been honest with myself in that moment, it probably would have been the right moment to pass, because it set a tone of, I don't fully trust you with my art, from that guy. And, those are lessons you learn along the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an interesting, story. I mean, because like we've talked about, kind of one of the continuing topics that we've been discussed is that trust. Right? Yeah. And I know if I was an artist, if I still wanted to do things, no matter who the producer was, that means that I'm not really respecting the craft of producing. It's kind of like, I don't trust anybody, which you have to overcome if you want to make the music. I always like the bands or the artists that are willing to work with a different producer from album to album. Some will keep, 2 or 3 albums the same, and then they want to change it up. I always admire that, because, what works with one producer, right? Yeah. Because you've got that relationship, you've got that history with them, with the music. And then to kind of change it up, that tells me that, an artist is trying to evolve in a certain way, is trying to find something different, and is trying to get a different perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. I do appreciate when an artist or a band does that.
I do too, man. I couldn't agree more. I think 2 records is kind of like, the first record, you're trying to do the thing, and then your second record, you actually accomplish it, and then it's time to move on to a different creative space. There's very few examples. Pearl Jam would be one, but of bands that have stuck with the same guy throughout their career and it actually worked. I think that's why, Metallica, did the Black Album and then Load and Reload with Bob Rock, and then had to shift after that, because at that point, it's like, if we're going to keep evolving as a band, we got to change something, and we can't, fire a member of the band. So Bob Rock became the sacrificial lamb, Plus, I think they accomplished what they set out to do,
Yeah. What's really cool, though, is like when a band works with one producer for 1 or 2 albums and then does other things with other producers, and then like 4 albums later, they come back. Mm. And what I like about that is because they've evolved since they left that, after that second or third album. So they went off and did some other things. So, anytime you work with somebody different, you naturally learn things, you naturally evolve, and that's what you want to accomplish. Yeah. And the producer has worked with all these other artists. So when you come back, you hope, but in most cases it is, the producer is a better producer. They've learned things too about, different sounds and different techniques and different ways to get the music out of someone. So when you see that happen, can be equally as interesting too, as well, because now you kind of see what the same group is, but just now a different time, what has time done to that group of people?
Yeah. Speaking of Daniel Lanois, the great example of what you're saying is, he did the Joshua Tree with U2, and they went off, and it was probably 20 years later they did. He came back and they did what's it called? All You Can't Leave Behind, which was a big comeback record for them at the time. And it's cool. It's cool that things went full circle like that.
Yeah. Paul, man, this has been a blast. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, we'll have to do this again. This was really interesting and really, a great perspective and learning a lot, and kind of just, we all know what happens, on stage, but when the studio is where all that stuff is created. So kind of giving a little bit of perspective and how that all works was really interesting.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Everyone, that's Paul Moak. As we talked about, you can hear his work on the album that I've been raving about all year, which is that Goodbye June album, See Where the Night Goes. Fantastic record. Can't say enough about it. You can also check out Paul on his website at paulmoakmusic.com. Learn more about his studio, his gear, what he's worked on. The Ann Wilson stuff is really cool too. I know we didn't get really time to get to it, but that's stuff too that eventually I want to dive into as well. But thanks for
next time.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care of each other. We'll talk soon.
You got the best of me, messed up the rest of me. I guess it's destiny. That's what it has to be. It's the same way I told you the first time. I tried, but I can't go on. We used to wake up wasted on the floor. Like I can't see what it's for. I don't think I can take this anymore. So here's to bed today. Cheers to your getaway. No matter what you think, some people never change. It's the same way I told you the first time.
Have no fear. Chosen Foods is here to defend your favorite foods from the forces of seedy oils and sketchy ingredients. With cooking oils, salad dressings, and mayo, all powered by the good fats from 100% pure avocado oil and simple, delicious ingredients. Chosen Foods.
To kids, summer isn't just time off. It's time building confidence and curiosity. But when school meals pause, millions of children lose the food they count on. Your support helps the Feeding America Network nourish every child's potential. Give now at feedingamerica.org/summerhunger.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.